I am Ben Doc Askins, the psychedelic science war storyteller, and this is the Anti-Hero's Journey podcast. What's up, all you anti-heroes out there? Doc Askins coming straight at your head with another one of these Q5 podcast episodes that everybody loves so much, where I ask a diverse array of people the exact same questions. And then we compare notes. How similar and how different are we actually whenever we scratch below the surface? I've got a treat for you today. I've got Dr. Ben Malcolm, who earned his bachelor's degree in pharmacology at the University of California at Santa Barbara, prior to his master's in public health and doctorate of pharmacy at Touro University in California. He then completed postgraduate residencies in acute care at Scripps Mercy Hospital and psychiatric pharmacy at the University of California at San Diego Health. After residency, he passed his exam to become board certified in psychiatric pharmacy and began his career as an assistant clinical professor at Western University of Health Sciences College of Pharmacy, before transitioning to his current entrepreneurial role as a psychopharmacology consultant, psychedelic educator, and the founder of spiritpharmacist.com. Ben Malcolm, the Spirit Pharmacist, envisions a society in which access to psychedelic drugs in a variety of safe and supported settings is available for purposes of psycho-spiritual well-being, personal development, ceremonial sacraments, and treatment of mental illnesses. His focus is on the intersection between psychiatric medications and psychedelic therapies. He has given several continuing education presentations to pharmacists and other healthcare professionals, as well as published over a dozen articles in peer-reviewed literature relating to psychedelics or psychiatric medications. His vision guides his clinical and education service-related professional activity. Ben, it's an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Likewise, it's really great to be here.
Yeah. Let's just get rocking and rolling with question number one. What's your story?
Yeah, what's your story? Well, first of all, I really like this Q5 kind of format because I think that allows me to say things I don't normally say about myself on podcasts. So when I thought of this, I was kind of like, what do you mean, what's my story? Like, what part of my story are you really interested in? So there's the how did you become the spirit pharmacist story, and I think we probably should put a little bit of that in there, but I kind of want to back up and almost do more origin story type of stuff ahead of time.
Yeah.
So I was born in Hobart, Tasmania in 1985. I lived in Tasmania. Yeah, exactly. Like Tas Devil in the house here. I'll be running around in a cyclone and that kind of stuff, right?
Love it.
So I grew up in Tasmania until I was about 10 years old, and I moved to Eugene, Oregon, the United States at that period of time. And I had a great childhood. I loved my childhood. I have really great memories growing up of the friends that I had there. I would say moving to the United States is probably I don't know if I can call it big T trauma, but it was a difficult time or a difficult event in my life. And at the time I didn't acknowledge that. I didn't notice that. It was only a long time later could I actually see it, because I would start thinking about my life and think, why do I just not remember much of my childhood? And through my kind of psychiatric training and whatnot, it was maybe if you don't remember much, then perhaps it was a really bad time and you're kind of dissociating a lot, and those memories would be repressed and things like that. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's actually the opposite, is that when I came to the United States, it was a difficult transition because I had established friends and I was 10 or 11 years old at the time. And I didn't have a choice. There was no choice in this matter at all. You just kind of had to move on with life and adapt and adjust to the circumstances that, you're given. And I think that it was easier to kind of push away my childhood in Australia and not explicitly acknowledge how much I really enjoyed it there compared to living in Eugene, Oregon. And that's why I'd almost chosen to forget certain aspects of it, right? So I was determined to leave Eugene, Oregon by about age 15 years old. My friend had shown me a picture of UC Santa Barbara. There was hey, you could go to this college on the beach. And I was oh, I want to do that. And so I worked hard as a competitive swimmer. That was it, because there was no Division I swimming programs in the state of Oregon. So I knew if I could be a good enough Division I swimmer to get a scholarship, it was my ticket out of the state of Oregon. And I was successful. I managed to go to UC Santa Barbara on a partial swimming scholarship. So I think that maybe is just different than most kids. It's like I decided where I wanted to go when I was a freshman in high school, and I needed to create an athletic scholarship to get there. And I was able to do that in the 4 years of high school. And that was like huge for me at the time, because I just remember thinking, dude, if you put your mind to big goals, you can make them happen. Like it was like a real huge proof of concept for me that you'd had this vision kind of kicking around in your head for 3 or 4 years. Then all of a sudden you're getting on the train and going on your recruiting trip. All of a sudden you were getting the scholarship offers, things like that, right? So I lived many places in California. I did my undergraduate there. I did pharmacy school in the Bay Area. I did a couple years of postgraduate residency in San Diego, and then I worked at a university, at a college of pharmacy out west well, not out west, 30 miles east of Los Angeles for about 4.5 years. So I lived probably like 4 or 5 different places in California over a period of about 20 years. And, the Spirit Pharmacist was doing a little moonlighting on the side. And then the pandemic happened, and there was officially no boundaries between my university work and kind of side consulting job. And as that pandemic year went on, I don't know, the review the applications and head this, really important committee of faculty stuff and things like that became less exciting to me. And the kind of like passion project that I've been building on the side with Spirit Pharmacist was growing, and it was becoming more exciting. And by probably the third quarter of that year, I was just kind of like, I think I'm going to do this. Like, I think I'm going to be this psychopharmacology consultant and the Spirit Pharmacist as a full-time type of gig or venture. I was extremely disenchanted with the United States by that period of time, the kind of culture and politics. And, frankly, not being born in the United States, it's like I was never a nationalist. I was never a patriot. I was never America, rah, 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 like that kind of like thing. I grew up with swimming, Aussie rules football, and cricket. Like basketball, baseball, whatever the third NFL. You see, I don't even know like the big like sports, know. Right? It's just
how do you
sort of
score
like
a goal unit in the
right.
sport of the
so you can understand. It's sort of like, how do you fit in as a 14-year-old in the United States with an Australian accent when you just don't care about basketball or football or baseball, right? You literally have like no way of connecting with anyone. I mean, that's not true, right? But there's something about the culture that if you're not into that, then you just like don't fit or like don't belong or something like that. So maybe because I moved at the age of 10, maybe because I left Oregon when I was 18, maybe because I moved around California a bunch of times, right? But I'm this kind of person that's changed scenery a number of times in my life. And at this point in time, I'm in Costa Rica. I've been here for the last couple of years, and I absolutely love it.
Nice.
It took about 8 or 9 months, but all of a sudden I would just kind of like be like, this is it. Like my whole life, I've been looking for this place that felt like home. And I couldn't find it in Oregon. I couldn't find it anywhere in California. And I kind of found it here. At least for right now, it just feels better than any other place that I've been, maybe with the exception of Tasmania, but I haven't been back there for, over 20 years now. So I'm not exactly sure, what I would think of it at this point in time. So that's the kind of like, how did I get here as far as like an origin story type of thing? I don't know. Do you want different levels of what's your story, or are we good for the moment?
Like I said, it's my podcast. It's your episode. You tell your story your way. I'd love to hear more.
So I was just gravitated towards psychoactive drugs at a young age, right? I was watching shows like Intervention on A&E, where there was someone that had a really heavy substance use disorder, and like the treatment model is just awful, right? It was like you take your entire friends and family and they corner them, and they're like, quit now or you're cut off from all of us, right? It's like the absolute like worst model of addiction treatment you could imagine. But it piqued my interest in addictive substances as a teenager. I was also just very interested in like true crime, forensic files, like the intersection of consciousness, drugs, and criminal activity have always been like something that's just like, I really like that sort of zone overall.
Instead of like
like I
Instead of
find it
like the serial
fascinating.
killer triad, you've got like the spirit pharmacist triad there.
Yeah, well, a little bit. I mean, like, psychopathy is just fascinating, right? Like before I was a spirit
Absolutely.
pharmacist, I was a psychiatric pharmacist, and
Sure.
so the zebras, like the weird things in consciousness, like the persons that personally I believe are like biologically wired to have no empathy. Like I think of like there's a hereditary type of like thing to sociopathy or like psychopathy. Like
Hmm.
sometimes the monsters are made, but I think that there's a genetic part of some psychopaths that's just kind of like
Sure.
that's just how it was type of thing. But I
Certainly a lot of
digress. That's not part
factors
of my
culminating
story.
together, right? Maybe
That's
some
not part of my
epigenetics
story.
too. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, not part of your story.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
sure.
digress a little
Sure.
bit,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like
not what a psychopath would say at all. Yeah, sure. Not your
yeah,
story. Anyway, your
yeah.
story.
Yeah. So I was just interested in psychoactives and particularly drugs that could cause addiction, which got me reading about them on the internet. And that's how I found psychedelics. I found MDMA and psilocybin on Arrowwood as probably a freshman
Okay.
or
Yeah, yeah,
sophomore
yeah.
in high
Yeah, you
school.
were a
Read about
researcher
them.
real early, huh?
Right,
Yeah,
like read
yeah.
about them for a few years. And by the time I was like 17 and a half, 18 or so, I was like, I got to try these in the next like year or two. Like, I think that these are like really substances that like, you read about them all day. And it's kind of like, you kind of become convinced after a while, like reading the anecdotes, the trajectories of what happens to people when they use are generally positive with those, whereas like other illicit drugs I was reading about, it wasn't positive and it was a very, very different sort of story overall. Um, so I was kind of, I would say, like I had an intellectual curiosity that led to an experiential curiosity, and I kind of bounced back and forth between, just being very intellectually interested in psychedelics and psychoactive substances and trying different ones. I did not know like, oh, I'm going to be the spirit pharmacist when I was like 18 years old. It was just more like, I think I should probably study something that's actually interesting to me. I'm the kind of person that gets bored kind of like quickly, and like I need
Yeah,
something
yeah.
that like actually like stimulates me or like fascinates me and something to like keep me going. So it was
Yeah.
more like, I'm just going to keep learning in this direction of pharmacy because I know I like studying this rather than I know what I want to be at the end of the day. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know, but I like studying this. And so I'm going to keep following that until something kind of comes up. And eventually it did. It was probably in my first year of pharmacy residency after graduate. I was kind of burnt out. I was working in the hospital a lot, and someone gave me a flyer for a second year residency in psychiatric pharmacy, and something just clicked. It was just kind of like, dude, you've been in graduate school and undergraduate doing this stuff for like 10 plus years now. You still don't know what you want to be, but the most fascinating thing to you right now is a thing that piqued your curiosity over a decade ago. Maybe it should be that.
Yeah.
Maybe you should do that.
The
Right?
pieces finally came together.
Right.
Maybe I should just be who I am.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. So it took a while to figure it out, but yeah, eventually it became clear. Like, yeah, you should be a psychiatric pharmacist that specializes in psychedelics, and you know, I think that everyone in psychedelics that's either an advocate or an enthusiast, it's like, well, I don't really want to like push psychedelics on people. Like my goal is just to give them information about whatever meds they're taking, whatever psychedelics they're interested in, and let them make the best decision for their health overall, right? So it's like I don't want to be in a position where I'm pushing persons to use psychedelics per se. But I think that most of us that are in this position of advocating or being an enthusiast to an degree have experienced some level of healing with it. And so for me, it's probably more like dysthymia and depression, workaholism, burnout, people pleasing. I was a yes man for a long time, and yes, 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 yes. Oh, I just said yes to this stack of shit that I don't really want to do. And now I'm exhausted and tired and don't have time to take care of myself, right? So,
Yeah,
codependence, like people pleasing.
sure.
So I would say like psychedelics have really helped me, find who I am and do what I really am passionate about, but also, yeah, exactly, help my mental health, get out of the burnout, depression, workaholism zone, learn how to draw a boundary. You know, if it's right, get rid of the toxic people in your life, like things like that, where I don't know, it's helped me clean things up a little bit. And gosh, is my side of the street just immaculately clean and spotless at this point in time? No, it's not. Like it's not, you know.
Yeah.
But they've been very, very helpful for me. And so you say, like, what's your story? I actually think about this all the time as sort of like, this story is, we're in the middle of the book right now. Like, you know, there's still many, many chapters to kind of come, and I'm not really sure what's going to unfold, but I have enjoyed things so far. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, not to oversimplify things, but it sounds like a story of human flourishing to me.
I like that. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're blossoming. You're blooming. It's beautiful.
Truth. Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that much. You know, I know the origin story is always important, and then getting to hear what's been going on lately. That brings us more or less up to date. It's interesting that you find Costa Rica to be home too, because I feel like maybe we all have kind of like an internal topography, and when we find a place external to that matches, it just feels like home. But you know, sometimes you got to globetrot a little bit to figure out where the match is, and you were just kind of in a mismatch there in Oregon until you, and maybe in California until you kind of found your way down to Costa Rica. That's beautiful.
Well, again, it's sort of like when I think about like my 3 favorite places: Tasmania, here in Costa Rica, Santa Barbara. It's like all places on the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right. It's like they're all places on the Pacific Ocean.
Nice.
UC Santa Barbara has lots of eucalyptus groves. They're not a native species there, but I think that there was something about coming to UC Santa Barbara. It was like, I recognize this place, but it's been like 8 or 10 years since I've been there. So it's like a new place.
No koalas,
but there was something, there was no like kangaroos or whatever, but there was something about it that was kind of like, oh yeah. So the sort of inland, gray, dreary Pacific Northwest, some cool people there, but just not the environment for me.
Yeah. Those are important recognitions to make for sure. What a great story. So transitioning then from the past with your story to the future with your intentions. What are your intentions?
Yeah, so I think as like the spirit pharmacist, or just as a psychiatric pharmacist, or maybe just as a pharmacist, like period, right? You could kind of like back up through these sorts of like layers, because what I'm doing as the spirit pharmacist with psychedelics is probably not really that inherently different than what a regular pharmacist tries to do with other types of substances or drugs, right? So the intention there is safe and effective drug use that allows persons to have the experiences they want, right? So there's the recognition on safe and effective use, sure, but it's kind of safe and effective use merged with cognitive liberty, right? Like, because again, like you read at the beginning, I'm not just about psychedelics within a medical paradigm. Yes, I'm really happy that this research is happening. I'm so stoked at the safety data that it's generating, because I don't know, the data is setting these substances free. The data is vindicating them, right? It's really like wonderful what's coming out of there. But do I believe you have to have a refractory illness to benefit from psychedelics? No, absolutely not. You know, that doesn't really make sense to me. So yeah, safe and effective drug use within the context of allowing people to explore the world and consciousness and have the experiences that they want, right? You know, like ultimately, like my intention is to be the kind of person that moves humanity towards being an ecological steward of the planet. I think that humanity right now kind of rolls with this idea that, like, I don't know, God created the planet for man, not for the jellyfish, not for the dolphins, not for the trees, not for the oceans, for man. So man plunders and man pillages and man does whatever the heck he wants with it, and man destroys himself in the process. Right? Which it just doesn't seem like the relationship's right. Like literally,
hero's journey.
Like I feel like our consciousness is about the quality of a toddler. Right? It's sort of like, it's like the world is like a stack of blocks, and the toddler has not yet learned how to like stack the blocks into something nice, and all it knows how to do is smash down the tower right now. Right? Like when I think of like the invention of plastic, I'm kind of like, where were the regulators when on day one, you know, when that came out, like before it was completely integrated into the fabric of society in ways that make it almost impossible to like live your life without it. right? It just kind of like, why? Like where were the people that were critically thinking at that point in time?
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to get out of this ideology that the world is made for man and into the ideology that, man is part of the world. Man is not an alpha predator, but man has this level of intelligence that allows him to be a steward of biodiversity on the planet. So my intention is like to move humanity towards what I consider to be their right place on the planet and have the right relationship with animals and nature and spirit in general.
Yeah, get nested into the ecosystem rather than trying to like ride on top of it and crush it.
Instead of like dictating the ecosystem and wiping everything out in the process, it's kind of like to live with what's there in a way that supports everyone. It's totally possible.
Oh yeah, it's a holarchy instead of a hierarchy, right?
Yeah. There's lots of talk about racism, and it's an important thing, right? But speciesism is one of the biggest problems, I think, like, is just prioritizing human life over anything else, right? Because it's going to bite us in the butt, It's,
yeah, because we're a part of a network, right? Like you build a big old castle and you put a cannon on top of it and you shoot the cannon straight back into the castle. That's a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't shit in your own nest, so to speak. Right?
Exactly, nailed it. So
I think a third intention, right? Like other intention I'll put out there is to be kind and to be kinder as I get older, like to get kinder and softer as I get older, and less angry, less quick to snap, less impatience. Right. Like we were talking a little bit before this, we were talking about the anti-hero's journey. And if you followed me around for a week, there'd be moments where I look like a hero and moments where I look like a villain. Right. So I think I'm acknowledging here that I have some heroic moments where I get to step into this kind of kindness. And I think I'm acknowledging too that I see interactions and things that occur that I could have been more kind. I could have stopped and thought and paused and checked myself and come up with a different response. And I try through email a lot of the time. I switched my signature line in pharmacy school from regards to kind regards. And I think that this has been helpful for me because it forces me to write the word kind at the end of every email. And then it forces me to sometimes reread the email and think, is this kind? Like are you saying kind regards? Is it actually kind what you're sending? Or is it, like...
Is that just adding insult to injury? Yeah, calling this kind. Yeah,
right, like this kind of...
Taz. Right.
Yeah, so kindness is, who I want to be, who I strive to be, yeah.
Yeah. Like at this point, I think my relationship status with everything is it's complicated.
Yeah.
So, those are some beautiful intentions. Be kinder and be, and just don't shit where you eat. Yeah, those are good intentions, right? The way that I try to bridge the past and the future and bring things into the present is through gratefulness. So that's why the third question is, what are you grateful for?
Yeah. Just life, man. Just living. There's this reggae song. It's called "Give Thanks." Wonderful song. It's like a hymn, right? It's just like incredible. Like as far as the
you
lyrics,
sing it?
but oh man, sure. Let's see here.
Yes.
Well, I know it's a long, long road, but we're ready to go. Do. I found beauty in the balance in between all the highs and the lows. I forget the next lyrics, but you're ready to go.
That's awesome, man.
So basically it's about, that life isn't beautiful all the time, but you're grateful for the balance of the highs and the lows. And I think that one has just really hit me the last couple of years. I've been going through a lot personally. I've been going through a separation in my personal life. And there has just been moments where it's like, I feel ecstatically liberated and grateful for where I've landed and what I do beyond like what I could even imagine like 10 years ago. And there's been times that have been really, really tough, right? And being able to feel all of it, right? And not just sort of being numb to the joy and numb to the pain, but really being able to be like, this is so hard right now, or this is so beautiful, I'm crying. You know, that kind of dynamic shift that you have in your life. And breathing, it's so good. You know, it really is. Like I don't know if there's anybody in your audience here that uses cannabis. Maybe there is, right? One thing that I think that you should do if you like cannabis is to smoke a fake joint, right? Like pretend that you got a joint lit and just suck in the sweet air and just puff on life for a little bit. You feel really good after a few minutes of just acting out like the breathing mechanisms, to the point where I'm kind of like, I think that maybe half the reason that using cannabis relaxes people is that they force themselves to take some intentional breaths, even if it's just one big bong rip, right? Like there's something that's intentional about breathing there, right? But truly, you can try it without the drugs, and it's also a really cool exercise or thing to do if you've never done it before.
This should be like a whole spirit pharmacist breathwork workshop where you just have people smoke fake joints at whatever next conference you get invited to speak at or whatever.
Just hyperventilate off this fake joint and book a session with me afterwards to integrate your experience.
I love it.
You know, my daughter, God, I'm so grateful for her. She's literally just the best thing that's ever happened to me. And the time that we spent together is just amazing. Water. Like water is one of the things that it's just kind of like, gosh, when you, when cold water just goes down the back of your throat when you're thirsty. And it's like, often, like I'm like an audible drinker where I'm like, oh, that's so good. That kind of thing.
Yeah, my wife gets mad at me every time I take a drink because it's legitimately loud. Like I can't be mad at her for being mad at me, right? Like it's my fault. But yeah, it's delicious.
Right, it's like, wow, did a band of camels arrive at the oasis or what? It sounds so.
Yeah.
So it's just the simplicity.
Time you've ever had a drink, man? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So
how's your daughter?
Nature, breath. She's 5.5.
Nice. Yeah. That's a good age.
She's at a golden age too, like the age of like pretend, like the age of
she can stack blocks.
Right, you like pick up a pen and it's like, Daddy, pretend this is the jousting thing for the horses. You're like, that's exactly what it is.
I'm all over it. Yep.
Pretend this, pretend that, and then pretend that this happens. It's like, okay.
They're putting together their little stories already. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then narrative.
Right. Yeah. Just so beautiful, so precious. Like just exactly try to cherish the moments with her.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful list of things to be grateful for. All the elements plus family. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with all of your story and all your intentions and all of your gratefulness, what are you creating?
Well, I'm creating a niche in spiritual pharmacy. That's like one thing that I'm creating. It's kind of like a specialty for maybe healthcare professionals, but particularly pharmacy and pharmacists within psychedelics. And I think part of it is, a pharmacist can be helpful as far as screening, looking at drug interactions, what else? Counseling, education. Like pharmacists are very good at those kinds of like things. But I think like spiritual pharmacy, beyond just helping people with the standard types of things like a pharmacist would do, with psychedelics, it's more of a recognition that drug use can have a spiritual quality to it as well. Like there's blood pressure meds that make your blood pressure go down, or anti-dementia drugs that are supposed to boost your cognition, or SSRIs that are supposed to change your kind of like emotional composition. but is sort of like missing from pharmacy or just drug use generally, that they can create spiritual types of states, and that these types of substances could be incredible probes to understanding what kind of biological construct a human being even has as far as spirituality and, perhaps like the adaptive properties of that, like why does that exist, like why would we be imbued with this kind of like sense of a spiritual existence. So yeah, that's one thing I'm trying to do. you know Creating a resource and education like center for persons that are interested in psychedelic pharmacology and drug interaction. I think that's what I'm trying to do. And then just be an example of how a pharmacist can be a professional that gets paid for their knowledge and time. Maybe that parallels, that functions like parallel to the traditional healthcare system. But this has been a really big deal in pharmacy for a very, very long time. When I was in pharmacy school in 2010 to 2014, it was all about provider status, because all of these other healthcare professions are recognized as providers of healthcare, whereas a pharmacist is not recognized as a provider of healthcare. Most of the pharmacists in America, probably 75, maybe even 80% of them, work in retail pharmacy types of settings. And the model there is that the insurance company pays the pharmacy when the pharmacy dispenses a product. So there's no incentive to teach people how to use medicines. There's no incentive to ensure that they're going to use the medicine right. The incentives are all placed upon how much product can we dispense in the shortest period of time possible. They're hourly waged employees. They work 10 to 12 hour shifts. They're understaffed. They can't even get a bathroom break half the time or an adequate lunch because the pharmacy can't run without the pharmacist in it, right? So unfortunately, pharmacists have not achieved provider status yet. That would require amending the Social Security Act, which is an act of Congress. Not exactly easy to achieve, but it's just a bummer because, I saw these headlines in 2010. I see them now. And sadly, you can look at the cover of Pharmacy Times from 1980 and the headline is the same. Provider status just around the corner, right?
Oh, wow.
So I think that, part of the reason that I created this model is that I believe that the knowledge a pharmacist has is integral. It's critical. And I believe that there's no way that someone should go to a 4-year doctorate of pharmacy program, be trained as a clinical pharmacist that has these skill sets in being able to screen almost any medication regimen for drug interactions, design protocols for safe use of psychedelics, like on and on and on. The level of training that you get just to be the most underutilized healthcare professional that gets paid to dispense products at an hourly wage. And by the way, they really ramped up the number of pharmacy schools because CVS said that there was a shortage, and now the wages are just dropping, right? So pharmacy as a profession, I think, is having a hard time overall right now because the public doesn't really know what they do or what they're capable of doing. And then they're just not compensated the way a healthcare provider should be, or not even recognize that they are a healthcare provider. So part of what I'm trying to do is create a model where it's, even if it's penny for your thoughts type of model, it's actually like, yeah, I set my own hours, right? Yeah, I get paid for my knowledge and time. Last time I checked, that's the definition of an actual professional, right? A professional gets paid for what they do. An amateur doesn't. Right? A shop seller, they sell products like, merchant type of thing. And nothing wrong with that. Like nothing wrong with being a merchant, right? But unless you go to a doctorate of pharmacy program for 4 years, and then I just think that it's kind of like, how do you settle there? Like, how do you settle there?
Yeah. You spend 4 years learning how to count pills, right? Like that's all you do. Yeah.
Count by fives.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like
everybody's
why?
reductionistic about it. Yeah. Yeah. I was tangentially aware of a lot of that, and I'll tell you, some of the best professors that I had in physician assistant school were the clinical pharmacologists. Like there were some exams that I wouldn't have passed if it wasn't for the notes from the pharmacists lectures about just the medications in that subject. But the actual subject being taught to me by providers was poorly delivered enough that I was like, I'm just going to study the pharmacist notes on this one and see how the test goes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, like to be at the table when these conversations are happening. I think that's another thing. It's like pharmacy, they're very rule following and conservative, like overall. And honestly, like that makes a good pharmacist. There's nothing wrong with that. But I saw it with cannabis, right? It would be, we need more research. We need more research. We need more research. Oh, it's federally illegal. We need more research. And then, zoop, okay, here's the model. It's all rolled out. Where's the pharmacist role? Nowhere, because they weren't at the table. Now the psychedelic things happening, and it's like, hey guys, you want, like, like the therapists are staking their ground, like physicians, psychiatrists, they're staking their piece in it. I see nurses and whatnot advocating. There is a psychedelic pharmacist association, so I have to give my profession like some credit. There are groups of pharmacists that are really interested and really trying to push this forward. So I don't want to like make it out like, I'm the only person that's interested in this as a pharmacist, because that's not really true. But I just think it's just a similar repeating story about, you've got this like hot new trend coming along, and it has to do with drugs, and you're not able to see where things are going, and instead it's like eyes fixed on the rearview mirror and still thinking about the 60s, and it's just sort of like, no.
Yeah.
No.
And some of that was a surprise to me coming into civilian practice out of the military, because the military does a lot of things very, very poorly. But one of the things that I got to see was a lot of collaboration across all the allied health professions in the Ireland Army Community Hospital on Fort Campbell there. The way that they integrated, clinical pharmacists into the ongoing conversations and patient care among all the levels of providers there was just... It set a standard that I didn't realize wasn't the standard other places until I got out into the world and like had to grow up. It was like, oh, you guys didn't know pharmacists know how to do all of this stuff?
Yeah.
Blew my mind.
A pharmacist is the treatment expert, right? Right. So it's like, when it comes to the level of like, we have a diagnosis, it's time to treat. It's almost time to hand it off to the pharmacist. I mean, I think of physicians or doctors as diagnostic experts. Like a physician is supposed to be able to take a person that's not feeling well and figure out why you're not feeling well. Like that's their job, is diagnosis, right? They oftentimes prescribe treatments and know something about them, but it's actually the pharmacist that's usually more knowledgeable about the treatments, how they're used, the logistics, their mechanisms, which ones are cost effective, what can be covered, like things like that, right? So it's almost like the way the model should be is that, at the point of diagnosis, when treatment is being considered, that's when the pharmacist needs to sort of be there, not after it's written on a pad, send it to the pharmacy, and now the subordinate pharmacist fills whatever orders and dispenses a product to earn their eroded,
especially with
living.
Complex cases where each specialty is writing their ideal, prescription protocol for one single patient, but you've got neurology, psychiatry, critical care, the family practice, like everybody's got a finger in it, and they're all saying this is what we need to do for this complicated case. And who's really at the nexus of all of that? It's the pharmacist.
Yeah. Like, how many chronic diseases does the average person over 65 have? Like how many specialists on average consult with somebody that goes into a hospital room? More than one.
Yeah. It's getting to be where it's all of them all the time anymore. Some places for sure.
Yeah,
well, I appreciate you dropping that level of knowledge on the audience. I'm not sure that my target audience would have been familiar with that, but I don't know them that well yet. We're just getting started here, so maybe that's right up their alley. But I very much appreciate that level of wisdom.
Yeah. I mean, I do something different, but I don't know. I became a pharmacist because I like the profession of pharmacy, and I worked in academia because I wanted to be an ambassador for pharmacy. And now that I'm in this world where I interact with alternative healthcare, lay persons, persons that are interested in psychedelic healing, other types of like healthcare professionals, lots of therapists, right? It's sort of like, it's still just a wonderful opportunity to be an advocate for pharmacy, because pharmacy is necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got a few minutes left here, and we're coming to the biggest question of them all. Question number 5, everybody's favorite. Ben Malcolm, spirit pharmacist. Who are you really?
I don't know. I think that's part of this is the fun for me is that the mystery gets deeper the older I get. I think if you would have asked me this when I was like 13, I would have given you a very exact answer. And it probably would have had to do a lot with the first question, like, what's your story? Like, what's your story would have been who I am at some point in time. I think it's different now. I've been reading a bit recently because it's like, on the one hand, it seems like there is a level of separateness that we have. On the other hand, it seems like all life is connected, and those two things seem sort of paradoxical in some way, right? But recognizing that I am a being, or I'm an interbeing, like I'm a being between a couple other beings, like that kind of thing. So trying to soften the sort of illusion of self, or like the concreteness of self, I guess. It's sort of like, okay, well, I don't want to be like completely boundaryless and like bleeding into another person and believing that I have no separateness at all.
Right.
Because I think that like being really grounded in that sense of separateness, it makes it harder to be kind. Right? Whereas if you're sort of thinking, hey, this person is a part of me somehow, or how I treat this person will eventually come back to me in some way, shape, or form, that's helpful, right? I get this weird sense sometimes that I'm just some kind of like frequency or note, the same way that you could say like is like a universal note. Like there's something where that like there's a frequency of me. I didn't mention this, but I play some instruments. So the instrument that I play the best, right, is the didgeridoo, which is a drone instrument, which is just all about frequency and things of that nature. So I feel like it's kind of like tied into that somehow.
Did you ever see the study on treating sleep apnea with didgeridoo? Yeah. I love that study's out there.
Yeah, exactly. So for the audience that maybe is not aware, the didgeridoo is basically the world's oldest woodwind instrument. It's a long tube of wood. It doesn't have a reed. You just blow in it, and it has an opening probably somewhere between a trombone and a tuba as the size. And you really have a similar embouchure to brass as well, as far as the way you like buzz your lips and blow into it. But it makes a long, slow droning sound. And almost everybody has heard the didgeridoo, but not everybody would recognize that they've heard it, right? Like it's featured in a lot of like sound clips, like a theme song for Survivor and things, type of like thing, right? Where everyone's heard a didgeridoo.
It was like dubstep before dubstep got going. Yeah.
It's didgeridoo, man. All right, so if you want to, Ben Malcolm didgeridoo, you'll find some YouTube videos that aren't about psychedelic pharmacy.
Yes,
I love this. Sweet.
Yep, that's going in the show notes 100%.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm this sort of like this is one plane of existence, but it's like netted with these others that you can't really see, but things that are happening on the other planes are like affecting me somehow. So maybe like almost like string theory-ish, like a conglomeration of like woven reality layers or something.
Transdimensionality and all that. Yeah.
Like this is a good one that I use sometimes with the separateness and like oneness type of things. Is kind of like, well, maybe if I sampled the cells in my body and I asked the heart cell, the cardiomyocyte, hey, are you related to that hepatocyte that's hanging out in the liver? And the cardiomyocyte would be like, oh, no way. Look, I've got this like phospholipid bilayer.
Cool,
it kind of like seals me in. And it's like, I'm totally this independent thing. We like pump over here, do our like muscle contraction type of thing. So I sort of think of it as like, okay, there's 7.5 billion people. Every single person thinks that they're separate to some degree. Maybe there's a few that are like completely enlightened, right? But like most of us think that we're, separate to some level of degree. So maybe it's like cells in the body, in that, if you assemble all human beings, it creates something, or maybe all life, it creates something that we can't truly understand what his function is. Like my cardiomyocyte probably does not understand that it's part of Ben, right?
Yeah.
But you kind of get the analogy is
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
we're this own little container. We are a cell in the body of life, whatever that organism actually is, or whatever it actually is.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
like that a lot.
the universe like bent back to like observe itself. Like, you know,
Yeah.
for what
Yeah.
purpose? I'm not exactly sure.
Because it's fun.
Yeah. And nobody too special, you know. Like I get a lot of the times it's sort of, oh my god, how did you like I get like tons of appreciation for what I do, and that is just incredible. It's so validating and affirming for the path that I've chosen and things like that. But you know, overall, I'm just a regular human being. You know, like sometimes like I
Right.
meet a few people recently and it's almost like the spirit pharmacist in person, and it's sort of
Yes.
like
He floats towards us because he's a spirit.
it's like, yeah, I'm getting ciabatta bread at this bakery, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah. Yep.
So I always liked Ram Dass's sort of like, who am I? It's like nobody,
Yeah.
like nobody really that special, right? It's like it's when you're thinking that you're somebody,
Yeah.
you think you're better than other people, and I get caught in those modes of
I,
thought sometimes, and you know, it's reasonable to acknowledge where your skill sets lie, but my gosh, for me personally, I just feel like all of my knowledge is concentrated in this extremely tiny little slice of pie, and then everything else is just don't know very much about anything else.
yeah. Man, that's an awesome answer. I really like that a lot. It blossomed out again. It flourished from you. Who are you really?
Yeah.
I like it. You got any final thoughts for our audience?
Well, if you liked this interview and you wanted to follow Spirit Pharmacist, you can, right? So I am on social media. I have Instagram, Facebook. I do a little bit of LinkedIn, but really probably subscribing to my email list is the best. I do a monthly clinical research kind of digest where I go through PubMed and pick 6 or 7 of what I think are just the best articles relating to psychedelics that are coming out in the last month or two. And I summarize that for my list. Do webinar workshops. I have courses in psychedelic pharmacology. I have one course in antidepressant tapering because those are medications that oftentimes persons are needing to do something with if they're wanting to try serotonin-based psychedelics. I do psychopharmacology consulting. Basically, if you like me, follow me, join my email list. That would be the sort of, you know, like final plug type of deal for this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Fort Benning School of Infantry motto. Follow me.
Yeah. Well, who am I really? You know, internet marketer wasn't on that list, right? It's like part of what I have to do now, but that wasn't really the smoothest call to action right there, if you noticed.
It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, brother. This was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate having me. And again, I love your format. I love that you create the opportunity to speak a little bit different and to really share who you are with the audience, because it's an important piece of being a human.
Thank you, my friend. Doc out.